Hello, and welcome back to my channel. Today we're diving into one of the most enduring and mysterious stories in human history, the Great Flood. From ancient Mesopotamia to the Aboriginal Dreamtime, nearly every culture has its own version of a world-destroying deluge, often tied to divine punishment, cosmic resets, or even advanced lost civilizations. But what makes these myths so eerily similar, and where do they drastically differ? In this episode, we're going to break down 10 of the oldest flood myths, exploring their shared themes like divine wrath, survival through an ark, and the chosen few who lived to rebuild civilization. Then we'll look at the key differences that set them apart, including a flood caused by a giant's blood, a fish god guide, and even a civilization reborn from stones. And of course, we'll dive into the modern lore that has emerged. Everything from Atlantis theories to extraterrestrial interventions and the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. So whether you're here for ancient mythology, lost history, or a really good disaster story, you're in the right place. So let's get into it. In the Akkadian epic of Gilgamesh, King Gilgamesh seeks immortality and meets Unapishtim, the only human granted eternal life. Unapishtim reveals he has survived a great flood sent by the gods, who grew tired of human noise. The god Aa secretly warned him, instructing him to build a massive boat and take animals and craftsmen aboard. The flood lasted 7 days and 7 nights, submerging the world. When the waters receded, Unapishtim sent a dove, a swallow, and a raven. And when the raven found dry land, he disembarked. The gods later rewarded him with immortality. Very similarly to Gilgamesh, the Mesopotamia Maitreya's epic tells of human overpopulation angering the gods. First, the gods attempt to curb humanity through famine and disease, but when that fails, they send a massive flood. The god Aa warns Atreus, instructing him to construct a large vessel to save himself, his family, and animals. After surviving the flood, Atreus makes an offering to the gods, who realize they still need humans to provide sacrifices. In response, they create a system where humans now die naturally, preventing overpopulation. And in the book of Genesis, God sees humanity's wickedness and decides to cleanse the earth with a flood. He chooses Noah, a righteous man, to build an ark and save his family, along with 2 of every animal and 7 pairs of clean animals. Rain falls for 40 days and nights, covering even the mountains. After 150 days, the waters recede, and Noah releases a raven and a dove to search for land. The dove returns with an olive leaf that signals the flood's end. God establishes a covenant with Noah, symbolized by the rainbow, promising never to flood the world again. The Hindu flood myth appears in the Satapatha Brahmana and later Hindu texts. Manu, the first man, catches a small fish that warns him of an impending flood. The fish, which is actually the god Vishnu in disguise, tells Manu to build a giant boat and fill it with seeds and animals. When the waters rise, the fish grows enormous and pulls the boat to safety by its horn. After the flood recedes, Manu makes a sacrifice, and from the waters a new race of human is born. This myth establishes Manu as the progenitor of humanity. In Greek mythology, Zeus grows angry at humanity's corruption and decides to wipe out the world with a flood. The Titan Prometheus warns his son and daughter, advising them to build a floating chest. As the world drowns, they survive for 9 days and nights until landing on Mount Parnassus. Afterwards, they consult an oracle, who tells them to throw the bones of their mother behind them, interpreted as throwing stones from Mother Earth. The stones transform into new men and women, which repopulate the world. Unlike other flood myths, the Chinese flood legend isn't about divine punishment, but a catastrophic flood lasting years. The emperor orders Gun, a demigod, to stop the rising waters. He fails, and his son Yu the Great takes over, digging massive canals and diverting rivers to control the flooding. His efforts succeed, earning him the right to found China's first dynasty. This myth highlights engineering triumph over nature rather than divine intervention. Among the Muisca people of Colombia, a wicked priest named Huitaka corrupts society, leading to chaos and immortality. The god Bochica, seeing this, sends a massive flood to cleanse the world. However, Bochica later takes pity on the survivors and stops the flood by using his staff to create waterfalls at Tequendama, allowing the waters to drain. This serves as both a moral warning and explanation for natural land formations. The Maya creation myth in the Popol Vuh tells of several failed attempts to create humans. The gods first make mud people who dissolve, then wooden people who lack souls and gratitude. Angry at their lack of reverence, the gods unleash a great flood, causing the wooden people to scatter and drown. The few survivors transformed into monkeys, explaining their presence in the jungle. The gods later create humans from maize, marking the beginning of the true human race. Australian Aboriginal stories vary by tribe, but many describe a great flood caused by the rainbow serpent, a powerful ancestral being. Some versions say the serpent, angered by human misdeeds, releases rains and floods to cleanse the land. In other versions, the serpent's movements create the world's waterways, explaining Australia's unique river systems. The flood often serves as both creation and destruction, emphasizing the cyclical nature of the world. In Norse mythology, the first giant Ymir is slain by Odin and his brothers, and his blood floods the world, drowning all the other giants except Bergelmir and his wife. They escape by hiding in a hollow log and later repopulate the world. Unlike other flood myths, this one doesn't involve divine punishment, but instead serves as a cosmic creation story, with Ymir's body forming the earth, skies, and seas. Across many cultures, flood myths attribute the catastrophe to divine beings angered by human misdeeds, often as punishment for moral corruption, overpopulation, or cosmic balance. In the Mesopotamian traditions, Epic of Gilgamesh, Atreus epic, the gods flood the world to reset humanity due to noise and disorder. The Genesis flood myth follows a very similar moral framework, with Yahweh reacting to widespread wickedness. The Hindu flood myth of Manu aligns with this theme, where a divine fish incarnation warns of a coming deluge. The Greek Moiska and Maya myths frame the flood as a consequence of divine judgment, while original Dreamtime floods often involve supernatural beings reshaping the land. The Norse flood stands apart, with Odin's act of killing Ymir inadvertently causing the deluge rather than an intentional act of punishment. The Gunyu flood is a significant outlier. Unlike the others, it does not depict a divine force punishing humanity, but rather describes a long-lasting natural disaster requiring human ingenuity to resolve. Instead of a wrathful god wiping out life, this myth highlights an extended struggle against floodwaters and emphasizes technological and societal solutions rather than divine intervention. Most flood myths emphasize that only a chosen few, often righteous or divinely favored individuals survive. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, Unapishtim is selected by the god Aa, paralleling the Atreus in Genesis, where Atreus and Noah are warned to construct arks. In Hindu tradition, Manu alone is preserved to repopulate humanity, while Greek mythology features Deucalion and Pyrrha as the sole survivors. The Moiska and Maya stories depict a small number of survivors, often those who heed warnings or embody cultural virtues. Similarly, in Norse mythology, Bergelmir and his wife escape Ymir's blood in a hollow log, preserving the lineage of giants. The Gunyu flood once again departs from this pattern, focusing on collective survival rather than divine selection. Instead of a chosen family or figure escaping through divine intervention, this myth tells of society adapting and overcoming the disaster through engineering led by the hero Yu. Unlike other myths where civilization resets, here survival is a human effort, not divine favor. Many floods depict a disaster as divine consequence of human failure, where gods seek to reset civilization due to moral decline. The Epic of Gilgamesh and the Atreus epic reflect Mesopotamian fears of human overreach and disorder, while the Genesis flood attributes destruction to wickedness and corruption. Greek and Moiska traditions share this theme, with Zeus and Bohica punishing humanity for arrogance and immorality. The Maya flood describes a failed creation, with the gods erasing an imperfect generation. In Norse mythology, the flood occurs due to Odin and his brothers' violent reshaping of the cosmos, though it's less explicitly tied to human sin or disobedience. However, Hindu tradition presents the flood as a cyclical event rather than punishment, an inevitable transition rather than divine wrath. The Gunyu flood also diverges, being a natural catastrophe requiring human resilience rather than divine judgment. Similarly, the Aboriginal Dreamtime floods serve creative and transformative purposes, shaping landscapes rather than condemning human actions. A divine warning often precedes the floods, allowing chosen individuals to prepare. In Mesopotamian accounts, Ah warns Unapishtim, and Enki warns Atreus in the Atreus epic, while Yahweh directly instructs Noah. In Hindu mythology, it follows the same pattern, with Mataiza alerting Manu. Greek myth differs slightly, as Deucalion's father, Prometheus, possesses knowledge, indirectly enabling survival. In Muisca tradition, Bohica acts not as a recipient of a warning, but as a divine hero who intervenes, reflecting a shift in the pattern. Several myths omit direct warnings. The Gunyu flood lacks divine intervention altogether, with humans responding to a prolonged disaster. The Maya flood features no prior warning, as the gods wipe out the wooden people suddenly. The Aboriginal Dreamtime and Norse floods myth emphasize spontaneous survival rather than prior preparation, making them distinct from more prophetic flood myths. A boat or vessel plays a crucial role in several flood myths, as you may have noticed, symbolizing salvation through divine guidance or wisdom. In Gilgamesh, Atreus, and Genesis, the protagonists build arks to save and house their life to withstand the floodwaters. Hindu mythology aligns with this, as Manu constructs a boat to survive the deluge. Greek mythology follows a similar theme, with Deucalion and Pyrrha surviving in a chest-like vessel. These vessels serve as arks of knowledge, preservation, and continuity, reinforcing the idea that survival is tied to divine instruction and preparedness. In contrast, the Gunyu flood emphasizes engineering rather than escape, focusing on the canal building instead of a single vessel. Other myths, such as those of the Muisca and the Maya and the Aboriginal traditions, lack a specific boat narrative, with survival occurring by divine intervention or sheer chance. Norse mythology presents a unique variation, where Bergelmir survives in a hollow tree trunk, acting as a natural refuge rather than a constructed escape vessel. Some flood myths explicitly emphasize the preservation of animals, often reinforcing the themes of continuity and divine will. Gilgamesh, Atreus, and Genesis all featured the deliberate rescue of animals, often in pairs or as an obligation to the gods. In Hindu mythology, Manu preserves seeds and life forms, indicating focus on preserving biodiversity. However, in myths like the Greek flood, animals are not central, although their survival is implied. The Gunyu flood, the Muisca flood, and the Maya flood in Aboriginal Dreamtime traditions do not stress animal preservations, with the focus on human survival or transformation. The Norse flood is the most distinct, with no reference to animal preservation, as it centers on the primordial destruction of the giants rather than a global reset. Many myths conclude with the repopulation and reestablishment of civilization, reinforcing the flood as transition rather than an end. Gilgamesh and Genesis describe survival leading to a new lineage of humans, while Greek mythology features Deucalion and Pyrrha repopulating the world by throwing stones that become people. The Gunyu flood offers a unique perspective where King Yu controls the water and leads society forward, emphasizing governance and engineering as civilization-restoring forces. Other traditions differ. Atreus does not focus on explicit repopulation, instead ending with humanity continuing under divine constraints. In Hindu mythology, the flood serves as a cosmic function, resetting the cycle rather than directly repopulating the world. In Muisca and Maya traditions, civilization does not restart from scratch. Instead, a few survivors reform society or inherit divine wisdom. Aboriginal Dreamtime myths often depict floods as life transformation events rather than as civilization resets. And Norse mythology centers on giant survival without explicitly stating how humanity persisted post-flood. Unlike other flood myths that depict a sudden catastrophic event, the Gunyu flood describes a gradual, long-lasting flood that persisted for years rather than days or weeks. Instead of divine intervention or an ark providing salvation, the hero Yu the Great solves the crisis through human ingenuity, using large-scale engineering projects to divert water and manage the disaster. This marks a distinct shift from divine judgment to human resilience, portraying the flood as a natural catastrophe rather than a moral reckoning. The myth reflects China's emphasis on pragmatism and governance, showcasing the foundation of the Zhai dynasty through the triumph of civilization over nature. In most flood myths, survivors repopulate the world through biological reproduction or divine blessing. But in Greek mythology, Deucalion and Priya recreate humanity through symbolic and supernatural means. Following Zeus's destruction of mankind, the couple receives the oracle's cryptic instruction to throw the bones of their mother behind them, which they interpret as casting stones from Mother Earth. These stones transform into new humans, making this myth unique in the metaphysical method of rebirth rather than traditional genealogical continuation. This reflects Greek thought on transformation and divine intervention, reinforcing the role of prophecy and human ingenuity in overcoming divine wrath. Unlike flood myths that involve rain, rising seas, or divine punishment, the Norse flood originates from a primordial act of violence. When Odin and his brothers slay Ymir, the first giant, his blood floods the world, nearly drowning all of his kin. This first version departs from the theme of human wickedness or cosmic reset, and instead represents a mythic battle of creation and destruction. Rather than judgment on humanity, the flood is a byproduct of reshaping the cosmos, marking it distinct from the other moralistic and civilization-rebuilding narratives of other flood myths. A unique feature of the Hindu flood of Manu is the presence of a divine fish-shaped guide who warns Manu of the impending deluge. Unlike other myths where gods act out of wrath or punishment, Matajya, a form of Vishnu, acts as a benevolent protector, ensuring the survival of knowledge and dharma. This represents Hindu cosmology's cyclical nature, where the flood is less about retribution and more about the transition from one age or yuga to another. Vishnu's presence also highlights divine intervention as a guiding force rather than a punishing one, setting it apart from the other flood narratives. Unlike flood myths that focus on a vessel or an escape, the Muisca flood centers around Bohica, a cultural hero who stops the flood rather than fleeing from it. Instead of building an ark or receiving a divine warning, Bohica climbs to a peak and uses his staff to part the waters, creating the Tikadema Falls. This makes the Muisca myth unique in that the flood does not restart civilization, but instead reshapes the land while allowing existing people to adapt and continue. The emphasis on the hero's ability to intervene directly, making this myth one of divine restoration rather than destruction and renewal. Unlike singular structured flood myths, the Aboriginal Dreamtime stories vary widely across different tribes and focus on shaping the land rather than punishing humanity. In many versions, the rainbow serpent or ancestral beings create rivers, lakes, and valleys through the Great Flood, making the event a creative force rather than a destructive one. There's no singular arc, chosen survivor, or divine wrath. Instead, these myths emphasize the interconnection between land, water, and spirit beings, reflecting indigenous Australian cosmology, which sees humans as a part of the natural order rather than its rulers or moral failings. And in the Popol Vuh, the gods create and destroy multiple versions of humanity, treating the flood as part of an ongoing process of experimentation rather than a final judgment. Unlike other myths where the flood resets the world once, the Maya gods repeatedly test and refine their creations, ultimately destroying the wooden people because they lack souls and gratitude. This narrative reflects a different theological perspective where the gods are actively engaged in fine-tuning creation, and the flood is just one tool among many, rather than defining the reset of humanity. Now on to the modern lore, is when I get to talk about aliens. Many ancient astronaut theorists believe the gods in the Epic of Gilgamesh were actually extraterrestrials, and the flood was not divine punishment, but a reset event orchestrated by advanced beings known as the Anunnaki. This theory suggests that Utnapishtim was given secret knowledge by these alien visitors who guided him to build an ark not just for survival, but to preserve technology and genetic material from a pre-flood civilization. Some point to the detailed descriptions of the Ark and Flood as evidence that it records a real historical event, possibly connected to an ancient spacefaring race that influenced Mesopotamian culture. Others tie this myth to Atlantis theories, claiming that the Flood represents the destruction of advanced human civilization, possibly caused by a comet impact or pole shift. Some versions suggest the survivors, like Unapishtim, were not ordinary humans, but the last members of a high-tech society wiped out by global catastrophe. This aligns with speculation that the ancient Sumerians inherited lost technology from this pre-flood civilization, encoding it into their myths. The ark in this context becomes a symbol of knowledge preservation rather than a literal wooden boat. And some interpretations claim that the Atreus flood myth also supports the theories of genetic engineering by the Anunnaki. According to these theories, the flood was a way to reset human DNA, either wiping out a previous genetic experiment or eliminating hybrids that were not meant to exist. The gods' initial failed attempt to control human overpopulation, such as plagues and famine, are seen as early forms of genetic intervention, with the flood serving as the final global wipeout before a new genetic lineage was introduced. This perspective ties into modern transhumanist theories, where humanity is seen as the product of past genetic experimentation by a higher intelligence. Some believe the ark in the Atreus myth was a DNA preservation chamber, not a physical ship, allowing for a controlled reboot of civilization. These ideas often overlap with conspiracy theories, suggesting that hidden elites or modern science continue this experimentation today, using genetic technology to shape human evolution in ways reminiscent of the ancient gods. Young Earth creationists interpret the Genesis flood as a literal global event, responsible for shaping many of Earth's landscapes, including the Grand Canyon and fossil layers. They argue that the flood buried prehistoric creatures, creating the fossil record and explaining why marine fossils appear on mountaintops. This view challenges mainstream geology. Challenges, I think, is the wrong word. Positing that Noah's flood was the key event shaping Earth's surface rather than a gradual process over millions of years. Others link Noah's Ark story to Atlantis, arguing that the flood describes the sudden destruction of technology and society, possibly due to a comet impact or the pole shift. In these theories, Noah, or his real-world counterpart, was not just a survivor, but a guardian of pre-flood knowledge. Some speculate that hidden knowledge or artifacts from this civilization still exist today, possibly buried deep beneath the ice of Antarctica or the depths of the Atlantic Ocean. In Hindu esoteric traditions, the flood of Manu is linked to the Yuga cycle, which describes 4 ages of human civilization that end in catastrophe. The flood in this myth is one of many resets, occurring when one age ends and another begins. Some modern interpretations suggest this aligns with periodic global cataclysms caused by astronomical cycles, such as solar flares, pole shifts, or cosmic radiation bursts. This sees Manu's story as evidence of a deeper knowledge of time cycles, possibly preserved by ancient sages or extraterrestrials. A fringe theory argues that the fish incarnation of Vishnu represents a being from another realm, possibly an alien or a time traveler who guided Manu to save civilization. Some claim that ancient Indian texts like the Vedas and the Mahabharata contain advanced scientific knowledge, hinting that past civilizations may have possessed technologies lost to time. The flood story in this case becomes part of a larger cosmic drama, where cycles of creation and destruction are tied to the movement of celestial beings. Many connect the Greek flood myth to the story of Atlantis, suggesting that Deucalion and Pariah were survivors of an ancient lost civilization destroyed by natural disasters. Some believe that Plato's Atlantis narrative is simply another version of the flood myth, describing a real sunken landmass that was home to a highly developed society. This theory suggests that Zeus flooding the world reflects a divine or natural event, possibly an asteroid impact or a sudden rise in sea levels during the Ice Age. Modern theorists also link the stone-throwing method of creating new humans to a genetic seeding or ancient terraforming, speculating that ancient civilizations had knowledge of DNA manipulation. Some interpretations view Mount Parnassus, where the Ark landed, as an important energy site or remnant of an ancient power grid, similar to pyramid alignments and ley lines found in other parts of the world. The Gunyu flood is often tied to theories that China's earliest dynasties had advanced engineering knowledge beyond what mainstream history acknowledges. Some claim that Yu the Great's ability to control the floodwaters indicates an understanding of hydraulic engineering on a massive scale, possibly inherited from a lost pre-flood civilization. The story also parallels the Great Flood myths worldwide. Others argue that ancient megastructures in China, such as the pyramids in Xi'an, may be remnants of a pre-flood society. Some alternative historians believe these structures predate traditional Chinese timeline, with the Ganyu myth acting as historical distortion of a much older event. The Muisca flood story ties into speculation that South America once housed a race of giants who were later wiped out. Some alternative historians cite elongated skulls found in Peru as evidence that a pre-flood civilization had genetic traits distinct from modern humans. These theories suggest that Mojica stopping the flood could represent a lost technology used to stabilize the Earth's climate after a catastrophe. Additionally, some claim that Lake Titicaca and other flooded ruins in South America indicate a pre-flood civilization, possibly connected to the legendary city of Patiti, or an Andean version of Atlantis. These theories argue that pre-Columbian civilizations may have had forgotten knowledge, erased by floods and conquest. The Maya flood myth is often referenced in cataclysmic reset theories, particularly those predicting the 2012 apocalypse based on the Maya calendar. The destruction of the wooden people is seen as an encoded warning about cyclical disasters, possibly tied to solar storms, asteroid impacts, volcanic eruptions, or in a pole shift. Some argue that ancient Mayan knowledge of astronomy suggests that the flood myth refers to real cosmic cycles where Earth undergoes periodic destruction and rebirth. There are also theories that hidden artifacts or codices may contain additional warnings about past and future disasters. Some researchers claim that Aboriginal flood myths align with evidence of past pole shifts, where Earth's magnetic fields reverse, causing global chaos. These interpretations suggest that the rainbow serpent could symbolize electromagnetic disturbances such as solar flares or cosmic energy affecting Earth's climate. Others tie Aboriginal myths to prehistoric contact theories, suggesting that stories of beings descending from the sky could refer to extraterrestrials or lost civilizations with knowledge of past catastrophes. Some researchers claim that rock art from tens of thousands of years ago may depict real prehistoric disasters recorded by ancient people. Norse flood myth and many of the other myths that we've already discussed are often linked to the Younger Dryas period, when Ice Age glaciers rapidly melted, flooding vast regions. Some theorists believe that Bergelmir, surviving in a hollow log, represents humans sheltering from an environmental disaster, possibly even in underground bunkers. Others suggest that the blood of Ymir flooding the world is a metaphor for a comet impact or volcanic eruption, events that could have drastically altered the early human world. The idea that Norse myths encode past extinction events is a growing alternative history theory. So, what do you think? Are these flood myths ancient memories of real global disasters, or are they symbolic stories meant to explain the cycles of destruction and rebirth? And which of these modern interpretations do you find the most compelling? Are we looking at a lost high-tech civilization, a cosmic cycle of resets, or something even weirder? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Upcoming, we'll dive deeper into the quantum biology hidden within these ancient stories, uncovering how they may hold unexpected insights into consciousness, energy, and the way life adapts to extreme change. This is the kind of myth mechanics that blurs the line between legend and something much greater. I encourage you to dive deeper into the academic sources that I provided in my channel bio. There you'll find a wealth of information and perspectives to consider as we continue our journey down the rabbit hole of myth and legend.